The SEC produced 5 1,000-yard rushers last year. None of them are going to be returning, though. So who's going to fill those holes? We have quarterbacks that ran for 1,000 yards, not just running backs, but who are the top 5 best running backs going into the SEC next year? What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Lucas Hill. Follow me over at X at Lucas_Hill23. Thank you all for 10,000 subscribers over at SEC Unfiltered's YouTube page. It has been an honor to get to be alongside the great crew of content creators and writers that have worked hard to get to where we are today. And the journey is only beginning, so we can't wait for the future. Y'all follow us over at Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok, and always like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube page. Today's video has been brought to you by our good friends over at SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app on your Android or Apple device, or go to SeatGeek.com and use code SECU for $20 off your first purchase. We know regionals are coming up. You guys obviously want to get the best seats available to you. Well, why not do it at a very good price with our good friends over at SeatGeek.com? That's SeatGeek.com. So, kicking us off at number 5 is CJ Baxter. Now, I know there's a lot of other backs that are coming back that played in the SEC last year that are better. But to me, I think CJ Baxter is going to have a big impact whenever he first steps onto the field. Here's a guy that had to come in to replace a 1,000-yard back in Jonathan Brooks last year and did fairly well. He got a lot of hate and a lot of controversy because of how he performs at some points, but he's a very shifty back. Second team freshman All-American, honorable mention Big 12 Offensive Newcomer of the Year, averaged almost 5 yards a carry last year, 138 carries, 659. First true freshman to start for Texas since Ricky Williams in 95. Well, you know what happened to Ricky Williams a couple years later. Goes on to break the rushing record. Now, I'm not saying CJ Baxter is going to do all that. The game has changed so much that he'll be lucky to even pass 1,000 yards, because I do believe Texas is going to utilize this guy not just as a running back, but he's going to be used as well as a receiver as well. He had 24 catches last year. Didn't do much with the ball, only averaged about 6 yards a catch, but he's going to get utilized a lot more going into next year with what Steve Sarkisian's offense is all about. I mean, the game has evolved so much that the backer is basically used as a safety net whenever pressure does come to him. You can expect him to do a lot of damage in the screen game, and he's got a great offensive line to help him continue the success that he had close to the end of last year, filling in for Brooks. So I do believe he's going to make an immediate impact as soon as he steps on the field in the SEC, and he's going to do a lot of damage as well when it comes to SEC play. At number 4, it's an interesting one. I got Marcus Carroll. Here's a guy that last year had over 1,300 yards and torched LSU's defense. Now, I know it was LSU's defense last year. Nothing was very impressive about LSU at all last year. But still, here's a guy that really did a lot of damage to that team. Averaged almost 5 yards a carry. He was the first team all-conference in the Sun Belt. Did a lot of damage. Him and Nate Knoll are going to get a lot of carries together. Am I expecting Carroll to run for over 1,000 yards? No. Do I expect him to do damage? Yes, absolutely. He as well is going to be a pass catcher with how Missouri's offense is, with what Eli Drinkwitz wants to do with him. He's a guy that's going to get his carries, but he's also going to be a back that's going to get 35, 40 catches on the year. He didn't get a whole lot last year, only had 23 receptions, but still, you're going to get a guy that is very powerful, 5'10", 210 pounds, runs with authority. He's not a shifty guy, but he's a fast running back in a fullback's body. I mean, here's a guy that is very athletic, knows how to read a defense, finds the open hole, and is very instinctive with the football. He knows when to run, how to set up for his blockers, and he can take advantage of any hole that he finds. No matter how big it is, he will find the open hole, and he will take advantage of it at any point of a game. Coming in at number 3 is Rocket Sanders. Now, I know he was hurt last year, but this is still an elite running back. I mean, there's a reason why they call him Rocket. This is a guy that ran for over 1,500 yards in 2022. Now, last year he did struggle with injury, but South Carolina is going to get a dog in Rocket Sanders, and he's perfect for Shane Beamer's offense. Lenore Sellers needs some help going into this first year as a full-time starter, and why not have an explosive guy in Rocket Sanders? I mean, this is a guy that very, very fast whenever he got into the open space. And whenever he was on the field for Arkansas, he was lightning in a bottle. This was a guy at high school, played running back, receiver, and linebacker. 6'2", 237 pounds. You're talking about a bowling ball of a back. There's no way that you can convince me that this guy really should be considered a fullback instead of a running back, but he's fast for his size. He doesn't look like he's 240 pounds. He looks like he's maybe 210, 220 at best. Now, he does need to lose a bit of body fat. I do see in a couple of images that he's still got a bit of a stomach, but I think if he loses some of that weight, his speed is going to increase gratefully. He's running maybe a 4.5, 4.6 right now. If he can lose at least 5-10 pounds of body fat, this is a guy that can easily break 4.4. And as a running back, that's something that you need to have going into this year, and especially going into the SEC. I do expect him to have another breakout year. I think this is a 1,000-yard back. Is his draft stock going to be hurt because of the injury? I mean, if he didn't get hurt last year, he was a first-round draft pick. But because of that, it really hurt his stock. So that's why he's coming back for his senior year, so that he can get his dollars up and as well can continue the success that he had at the end of his sophomore year. So coming in at number 2, this is an interesting one as well. I got Jarquez Hunter. When I look at Jarquez Hunter, there's so many great backs that came out of Auburn. You talk about Trey Mason, and this is a guy that really reminds me of him, Tank Bigsby from a couple years ago. Bigsby was a load at back, 5'11", 210 pounds. Him and Jarquez Hunter are around the same size as well. So last year ran for almost 1,000 yards, had almost 5 yards, had almost 6 yards a carry. He's going to be utilized greatly. Had over 1,000 yards of total offense last year. Had a record for the longest rush in program history, 94 yards against Alabama State, just by the way. I mean, he's learned from one of the best in Bigsby, who's now with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he knows the running back position well, and he's learned from a great back in Bigsby. He reminds me a lot of Trey Mason whenever he was at Auburn. If you remember Trey Mason, you saw how shifty he was in the open space. You saw how it was not an easy way to tackle him. Throughout his Auburn career, there's no way that you would have convinced me that this was not 1,000-yard back for Mason. All right. The thing about Trey Mason was this is a pass catcher out the backfield. And this was back when, I mean, you didn't see Gus Malzahn doing stuff like this. You had big-time targets like C.J. Uzomah, Sammy Coates, guys like that. Nick Marshall was running the option. But I think that this Auburn offense is going to go back to what Gus Malzahn harped on back in those days. The option play with him and Peyton Thorne in the backfield is going to be an underrated duo. And I do like what they both bring to the table, and I think it's going to benefit Auburn well. we'll see if Hugh Freeze decides to implement this offense. But, man, this Hunter's probably the most underrated back on this list, and he's not going to get talked about a lot because he's on a team that won't do a whole lot this year in Auburn. And I'm sorry, Auburn fans, but expect another 7-5 season at best. And number one, it's a no-brainer for me. It's Trevor Etienne. Now, the biggest issue that I have with Etienne is that he will likely be suspended to start the year because of the DUI issue. However, this is still a guy that, despite being the number 2 back, had over 1,400 yards rushing to go along with over 30 catches in his Florida career. If you think that that's something to just whatever about, you're crazy. He's going to be the number 1 back on a national championship winning team. Georgia's got to replace Kendall Milton and DeJuan Edwards. Etienne's going to be the feature back going into next year. I wouldn't be surprised if he does have a 1,000-yard career. But knowing Kirby Smart and knowing this Mike Bobo offense, they're probably going to have 2 guys that are going to split the carries. But this is still going to be a fantastic offense that it's going to be very difficult to stop. And Etienne's going to be the biggest reason of it. And if you remember about 10-plus years ago, there was a back that came out of Georgia named Noshaw Marino. Very, very similar to Etienne. Pass-catching ability to run through traffic, bowling ball of a running back. Marino's a bit bigger than Etienne, but the thing about Etienne is that there's a lot of Alvin Kamara in him as well. He doesn't need to run for 1,000 yards to improve his draft stock. His draft stock's already through the roof right now. He could be a first-round pick just going into next year. There's plenty of teams that are looking for an Alvin Kamara of a back. And all likelihood, they're going to find it in the SEC, which ironically is where Alvin Kamara is from. So Etienne, to me, is the best back in all of college football. There's no doubt about it. And I'm telling you, by season's end, Etienne's going to have close to 1,000 yards rushing, and he might have over 500 yards receiving as well. He's not going to get 100-plus carries. He only needs 60, 70 at best. Give the rest to the rest of the backs. That's what a Mike Bobo offense does. You split carries as well as get your playmakers on the field. And the biggest playmaker going into this year in the SEC is Trevor Etienne.